Well, with that, let's move on to our next presenter. Elrond Lawrence is visiting us here virtually from California. And are you in Salinas?
We're just outside of town. So we're kind of out in the country, but we're along Monterey Bay.
Ah,
If
wonderful.
anyone knows that area. Yeah, about
Wonderful.
10 minutes or so from the ocean. It's not too bad.
Yeah, not too bad. And that's going to figure heavily into your presentation, I'm sure.
It is. Okay, let me get this fired up. I've lived in the Salinas Valley for about 20 years, and so this is the former Southern Pacific coastline that I've been following. It was through to both passenger and freight traffic until about 2008, and now we get occasional freights. But the history of the line is just really briefly, it's all in agriculture. The Salinas Valley is about, I think it produces about 50% of all produce and agriculture in the country. And so it's a beautiful valley. And the one nice thing is that it hasn't been overdeveloped like so many other areas of California, in the areas where I grew up in Southern California. So here are a couple classic old photos just to set the tone. This is in Salinas. In the southern part of town was just nothing but packing sheds. And actually this line just to the left, you would see the old Spreckles sugar plant where, sugar beet trains handled their traffic. And these were a couple photos. So I think I was saying before, I did an article for Trains on the rise and fall of SP's lettuce business and its agriculture business. And these photos I found from the local Growers Association, which are just a riot. You could see the huge banner of the PFE car for the 1 millionth head of lettuce that had been shipped. And there is Miss Iceberg. And this is just the coolest photo. So I thought it was fun to share it for now. But this is such a great shot. So those were the glory days. There used to be, when we first moved to Salinas, there were still some of the old banners around that, had a very futuristic vision for the Salinas Valley. And UP was telling me that they were going to develop the ag business. They were going to come back and get it, but none of that's really happened. But the neat thing is there's still a lot of great old signs of the, both the agriculture business and in so many ways, this railroad is like a time machine. There are areas that are virtually unchanged from when SP had, steam-powered daylights rolling up and down the valley from San Luis Obispo to the Bay Area. And that's what I'm going to focus on. Nowadays, instead of, serving ag customers, this is now the trains basically are just rolling through the fields. But I thought I'd show you. This is literally about 10 minutes from where I live. It's an area called Castroville. It's the artichoke capital of the world. And if you look really close in that field, you can see all these tiny little artichoke heads, all being harvested by the teams. And this is a southbound freight. The last freights that we have nowadays are either repositioning auto rack trains, or we get siding stuffers of empty container well cars. But so when I moved into the area, one of my first goals was to try to find as much of the classic old SP as I could. And we still had a lot of SP power around in the early 2000s. And pretty much, even nowadays, we still get a few strays that are still in SP, scarlet and gray. And we get a lot of private cars too, and you can see the searchlight over there to the right. A lot of those searchlights are still around. When I first came to the area, a friend of mine, Mike Mickens, had moved into the San Luis Obispo area, so I had a few early shots from 1995. This was the helper team at San Luis Obispo that would for helping trains up and down Cuesta. And this is what it looks like today in San Luis Obispo with a meeting of the two coast starlights. And you can see the southbound starlight, train 11, is unit number 44 is not the best for wear, but the veterans unit looks fantastic. And you can see there's a modern day helper team that UP operated until about 5 or 6 years ago, because there was a one tank train operation that was serving that was just up Cuesta grade. There was a oil refinery, and or sorry, oil was it was an oil field area, and the tank train would go up and down Cuesta serving them. So one of the other early photos from my just like a day or two on Cuesta grade, which wasn't very much time, but this is the old Coast Starlight, where you could see the, nowadays they're classic F-40s leading the train up. This is an area called Gold Tree, which has some really neat curvature and a great horseshoe curve nearby. And this is in the early 2000s. You could still find a few trains that had Southern Pacific Power leading on the road. And this is one of the tank trains that I was mentioning. There's a little place called One Post, which you'll see in a slide later on, that the train would haul oil down the hill and then take the oil to a refinery in Los Angeles. So this is a few of the photos from when I first arrived in the area in the early 2000s. There were searchlight signals up and down the line. There were still old pole lines, and you could see there's a searchlight just a little ways down, and you could really get some neat shots where you could see the different aspects down the main line. And if you look over to just to the left of this close searchlight, you can even see the green aspect over there. And then there's a northbound freight coming through. And it was just really exciting to get out here, and it's very much old school California. And then here's the freight going off towards the hillsides that border the Salinas Valley. But it's really neat because the agriculture comes right up to the hills, and then the railroad runs along the edge. And there are all kinds of little towns up and down the Salinas Valley. This one is called San Lucas, and you can see the Coast Starlight coming through. And this is a pretty heavy telephoto shot to show you all the coastal mountain range and the green hills. And this is obviously winter time for California. Those hills are pretty golden during the summer. And I'm a big fan of not only trains, but also old highways, Route 66, Highway 101, and there's some neat old stretches of the original highway that you can find in a little area called Bradley, and you can still find the old wooden railings for the highway, which is really neat. And that's the northbound Coast Starlight going over the Salinas River. But some of what was fun going through these old photos, I pretty much have got about 20 years of photos kind of boiled down into a brief show. But I realized now there was an awful lot of variety that we got that I never expected to see, in Central California. But the Coast Starlight, when they have power problems, sometimes you get just really incredible locomotives up in the front end. And it was pretty wild to catch a BNSF, one of the SD-70 Max, leading a Starlight over the Salinas River. So one of the other trains that, going through my older slides, I'd forgotten all about this. We had a really neat period for several months where Union Pacific ran log trains up the coastline. And what happened is there had been wildfires in Arizona, and the timber had been charred, but it was just cosmetic damage, and structurally it was still good. And so UP hauled log trains up the coastline, and the trains were handed off in Oregon and to the lumber mills. And so we got several months of these trains running up the coastline, which is just fabulous to see. And so we're kind of jumping around a little geographically just to show you a picture that gives you a better idea of these trains. But and they smelled wonderful as they went by. It was like being in the forest. It was really a great time during the coastline. And this was all happening during 2003, around April and May. And this area is Aromas, where you could see a northbound train. And then as it passes, there's those rolling green hills again. But there's just, you could get a really good sense of the entire train here. So this is a little more contemporary. This is that area I mentioned where the tank trains were, our last regular through train that originated on the northern half of the coastline was in this place called One Post. And you could see the tank train facility. This is like a Chevron operation. And you can see the tank train, the locomotives are staged waiting for all the cars to be loaded over here to the left. And then to the right, this is our last remaining local. It's called the Santa Margarita local that goes down pretty much the length of the coastline, but it goes to a town called Paso Robles. It doesn't go down to its namesake area, Santa Margarita, but it doesn't go to San Luis Obispo, but it's pretty much our last regular train that for the moment is running on Saturdays, but it's passing the tank train here. And then sadly, a few years ago, we lost the tank train service. The cars were aging, and Chevron decided to go to trucks. And that was the end of our tank train, but it was pretty cool to catch this while it lasted. So just another shot to give you a sense of the agriculture. This is near Soledad, a little town, again, where the fields just roll, the fields just run right up to where the trains are. And I kind of hiked around to get a tractor in the shot. And this is the Santa Margarita local heading back up the coastline, going back home. So our regular trains are the Coast Starlights, and up till a few years ago, we had these great old Santa Fe high levels, and I'm a big Santa Fe nut, and it was so cool to have these last survivors of the El Capitan on the Coast Starlights, but they have since been retired. This was the second to last run of the Pacific Parlor cars, and so my wife Laura volunteered to drive, and I jumped in the back seat, and we basically waited for the train to come, and then she floored it and got to carry out her Mario Andretti urges while I shot pan shots out the back seat window. And this was my favorite by far. This was a really great one. It was neat that we were able to at least give them a proper goodbye. And this is just a little more of the flavor of the area. We have a few missions up and down. Obviously, California's known for its missions, but we do have a few that are near the tracks. But Mission San Miguel is right next to the railroad. And this billboard used to be there. It's since been taken down or covered up. But I finally did one of those crazy pull-offs on the freeway to get the Coast Starlight going by. So here's a couple photos together, but this was a UP special that ran in 2020, and you could see the San Miguel mission is right here to the on the left photo. And it's a fabulous mission to explore if you're ever making a trip out here. And then the photo to the right is the same special at Santa Margarita, where it's at the top of Cuesta Hill, leaving San Luis Obispo. And now it's going to make a fast run up the Salinas Valley to the Bay Area. But yeah, this was the powered by our people commemorative locomotive. And boy, that hasn't aged very well considering the way things are going with the Class 1s and their employees right now. But sure made for a great shot. This is a little farther up the valley now. It's an area called Metz Road. And this was an old railroad SP, an old SP siding called Harlem, and it's since been removed. And it's been removed a while back, but this is a really fun area where Metz Road goes along these bluffs, and you can just basically pull over and get these gorgeous shots of unspoiled California. And Highway 101 is way, way over on the other side of the valley before those mountains. And then probably one of our craziest specials to come through, we actually had a BNSF train come down the coastline. And we've actually had BNSF power come through here on military trains, and a couple run-through trains have had BNSF power, but this was I think it was an 18-car special, and they were doing a Western tour of like the Intermountain States and then out to California and down the coast. And so this is easily the rarest train I think I've shot in the last 20 years that I've been here. And here's our tank train one last time, just because this is that same geographic area that I've been showing. This is a little bit older, obviously. This is 2004, I believe. And the tank train was detouring because instead of leaving LA and going straight up the coastline, they had, I believe there was a derailment it might have been a washout. But for whatever reason, the tank train had to detour up the valley and up to the Bay Area and then come back down to service that area that you saw in one of the photos a while back. So it was really amazing just to get it going the opposite direction. It never normally ran through this area because this was far north of the actual oil fields. But then to get it in the last few minutes of sunlight, and it literally was, we were down to the wire. I think I was about maybe 10 minutes away from getting very nervous that the shadows were gonna kill the shot. So then I had to get in one more Centennial photo. We were lucky enough to get the Wimmer inspection specials, which was the UP Vice President of Engineering, I believe. But the Centennial was his favorite locomotive, the DDA-40X. And so whenever he did inspection tours to across the system, he would ask for the 6936 to run the train. And so in this photo, it's really unusual because he's coming down from Salinas. We're out in the valley, and he's passed an old searchlight signal, and he took the siding to let Amtrak go by. And so, I mean, this huge Centennial is going over this ancient track. And if you look, I mean, you can see the jointed rail. This is not big rail at all, but it was creaking and groaning as he came onto the siding track. So this one I had to throw in because our Salinas Valley during the summer times, you know, it's high produce season. The agriculture trucks are, you know, crossing the tracks all the time. And because we don't have many trains, some of the truck drivers forget that there's trains on these tracks. And so in this case, a semi filled with tomatoes decided that he was going to cross the tracks. And then all of a sudden he realized there was a train coming, and he high centered and could not pull himself off the line in time. And the southbound Coast Starlight plowed into him at about 60 miles an hour. And you can see tomatoes all over the front end, and you can see the remains of the trailer. And thankfully, no one was hurt. And you can see the tractor over here to the right. And the guy had his son with him, and thank God no one was hurt. But I had to include this fun little detail photo because if you look up at the windshields, you can see one tomato found its way onto the windshield wiper. And I mean, you can't make that stuff up. How precise is that? So yeah, I had to get a close up of this tomato. And the neat thing is, because all the tomatoes had been through this incident, they just gave away boxes and boxes of tomatoes, and whatever tomatoes were still in the truck, they just gave boxes away to all the communities up and down the line, and they were able to get free tomatoes thanks to this. So this was definitely one of my more fun moments of living along the coastline, catching this. So now we're up in the Salinas area. We're moving our way north. And when you get into Salinas, you run into a whole bunch of old searchlight signals. And these are especially rare because they have a lower aspect where I'm circling with my cursor. And they have the old S lamp to indicate a sighting. And these things are pretty ancient. I'd say this is probably about we're talking very, very early 40s. When these were installed, because we had a lot of islands of CTC, and this is you know, a throwback to that time. And in this case, this photo is only this was only in May. We actually have you know, we still have a handful of engines in SP colors, and we got this local with you know, it's a cotton belt GP60, but the SSW has been, you know, blotched out by the UP shield. But it's kind of fun that the S&W are still you know, still showing. And it's really interesting to see this ancient old searchlight signal with the PTC configuration next to it. UP retired a whole bunch of searchlights in this area about 12 years ago. And this handful of signals they didn't have the budget to replace everything, so they've left a few of them. So in a few slides here, you'll get to see that S lamp in action because it's really, really unusual. But This was another of my really rare catches. This is in 2007, and the Coast Starlight had its lead unit breakdown in Oakland, and a friend called and said they stuck a tunnel motor in as the lead unit of the Coast Starlight. And so we're pretty sure this was the last Southern Pacific SD40-T2 to come down the line. And it was pretty amazing because it was a patch locomotive, but for whatever reason, they had never covered the SP on the nose. So it was really like a last hurrah of the SP tunnel motor fleet on the coastline. And just to point out, I happened to photograph these searchlight signals being retired in 2010, and those number plates, this particular number plate is now sitting on my own searchlight in my backyard here in Oak Hills where I live. It's not the same signal, but I happened upon a searchlight signal, and it stands tall and proud. And so I decided that 1119 had to be the number board on the searchlight. But it's very fun to have these keepsakes from this photo. And this is just one more of the North Salinas, just to show a little more that we do get some variety on the Coast Starlights when we get these commemorative units. And this is the 1990s era, colors that we call the Pepsi can. And with this engine right now is running on the Coast Starlight back and forth, but we've been cheated out of getting it on the lead we got on the lead last night, but it was handling the train from Washington State a few days ago. And in Chico, the second unit broke down and had to be set out. And so this poor 160 had to handle the Coast Starlight into Oakland, but at that point they had to stick another engine on the front end. So I was all set to chase it down the valley, but we got denied. But I can't complain because this was a pretty great catch to get one of these leading the train on this pretty day. And it's so fun, their exhaust is like almost like PAs or honorary steam locomotives. So this is another rare catch that happened in the Salinas. This is the same area where I just shot. We've just driven a few miles north. And, I only lived here 20 years before I discovered this. We are just south of Castroville Siding on the coastline. And I had never noticed this concrete post before. And I was going to I was chasing one of these locals with the cotton belt engine on the lead. And I noticed this and pulled up, and I was texting my friend Brian Bergtold, and we were trying to figure out what it was. Well, then we realized, we learned from a friend that this is an indicator to let, this is in pre-radio days, when they were running their reefer trains, Southern Pacific installed these so that the head end would know that they were 99 cars out of the siding, and that they could begin to really, pick up speed and start to go at track speed. And I just cannot believe that this, this old 99 car marker has been sitting here all this time. And I mean, it definitely must have been, it had to have been installed, like I said, in pre-radio days. So it's been sitting there a really long time. So it's pretty amazing to get this with with an engine and SP colors too. And now we've reached Castroville. This is very close to where I live, and we have this one of these big landmark eucalyptus trees, I believe. And we do still get a lot of private cars, and sadly, the Silver Solarium is not one of them, since it's been sold and it's not traveling the country anymore. But I was able to catch it one day, and if you look over to the left, you can see this big power plant, and that's a harbor area, really pretty little harbor called Moss Landing. And that's that power plant is kind of the big, it's kind of the landmark of the area. But if you ever are in Monterey Bay, you should visit Castroville, because Phil's Fish Market used to be down there, and it was the place to get seafood. They have since moved to Castroville in town, but it's worth a stop if you're ever in Monterey. So this was the unusual. Talk about all the, I've been very lucky to catch a lot of unusual operations, but this one takes the cake. This was at Castroville Siding in August, and the southbound Coast Starlight was running about 8.5 hours late. The northbound Coast Starlight was running about 40 minutes late. And so the two Starlights, as Ron mentioned a while back, They ended up meeting at Castroville, where we still have those original S lamps for a train to take the siding. And this was just mind-blowing. The number 14, the one that's facing you, had just come to a stop. 11 was rolling up behind me, came to a stop, and the conductor comes out. He walks up to the switch and lines the switch so the train, so 11 southbound train can go and take the siding. And basically the train on the main should have done that, and people have mentioned that to me, but I think the guy did it because they had pretty much the other train had just pulled up, and I think it was easier for this guy to do it. But it was just amazing to see this. I mean, these are two long distance passenger trains, and here we are watching operations of a guy manually throwing the spring switch so that the southbound train could take the siding. And then once he had lined the switch, number 14 fired itself up and had resumed its journey north. So it's pretty wild to get encounters like this here. And I've since had another train take the siding, and I was able to get some close-ups of the S lamp. So if you're a signal geek like me, we tend to get a little crazy about that stuff. So this is the gap from Castroville heading to Watsonville Junction, and you can see one of the old heritage units on the lead. One more look at the artichoke fields. Actually, this is lettuce in the foreground. Actually, it might be cabbage, and then there's artichoke fields in the distance. And this is a really beautiful area called Elkhorn Slough. And this is an inlet from the Pacific Ocean. And that place I mentioned called Moss Landing is where the inlet comes in. And it's this beautiful refuge. There's just bird life and wildlife everywhere. And there's kayaking. And it's just a wonderful place on the Central Coast. And so you can see northbound train 14 is working its way through the slough. And this is not a drone shot. I actually figured out how to get to a agriculture field, a strawberry field that was up on a bluff, and I was able to go after they shut down for the day, and I drove in and did a tiny bit of trespassing to get to this shot. And this is a ground level version of the same train going along the ocean. We get a lot of fog in the summers, and this happened to be a day where the fog was breaking up and that gorgeous sunshine was lighting up the train from underneath the clouds. And I've kind of learned over the years that I've caught a few really unusual trains on the coast. This is another one that was pretty wild. We actually had a BNSF war bonnet. Me being a Santa Fe fan, I was thrilled to catch this, leading the Coast Starlight and an Amtrak Heritage unit through the slough. And this one I threw in since I am presenting at the Wisconsin chapter. This was a train, this was an art train. They called it was the station to station train, and there were all these musicians on board. And I think like Mumford & Sons and some of the other bands were on this train traveling around the West. And sure enough, on the rear end, there was the Milwaukee Road Skytop Lounge, Cedar Rapids, bringing up the rear. And it was so cool. I'd never seen it in person before. And, as someone who, I work for the Center for Road Photography, and I've seen John Gruber's great photos of them. And it was really exciting to experience this in person. So we're winding down. This is a stop at Watsonville Junction. This is where the coastline, there used to be a huge staging yard here for the produce trains. And now it's kind of a shadow of its old self. But this is one of those days where it actually looked really, really busy. And there was an auto repo train that was waiting for the Coast Starlight to come up and pass by. There's also a local that is getting ready to take off. And then there's some yard power sitting in the distance. And so it's one of those moments where we can pretend that our normally quiet coastline was suddenly a bustling railroad. But the other thing that makes Watsonville interesting is the Santa Cruz branch splits off from here and heads to its namesake town. And this is one of the most scenic branch lines in the country. It just winds along the ocean. And you get vistas like this everywhere. And it's just a stunningly beautiful line. Union Pacific ran their last train over it in 2009. This area is called La Selva Beach, and this trestle has been photographed. I grew up seeing photos of this trestle, by guys like Dick Dorn, and well, just everyone had shot SP locals going over this, and it's been really exciting to get to shoot UP trains over that line while it lasted. My very first trip, we did get an XSP engine leading, and so this is probably one of the few shots where I can say I've got Southern Pacific and the coast, even if this isn't technically the coastline mainline. It's definitely got that coastline vibe. This is the railroad that took over after UP. UP left the Santa Cruz branch. They briefly had operations carried out by Sierra Northern, and then Iowa Pacific took over, and they began running a train to Christmastown. And so this is the train doing street running in downtown Santa Cruz next to the boardwalk, which is just a beautiful area. Again, if you're ever visiting the area, you should definitely come up and give it a try. Sadly, Iowa Pacific went belly up, and they were always kind of living hand to mouth. Our daughter actually worked on the train for a summer, and she would tell us about the problems they had just getting their paycheck. And she would go, I'm in high school. These people, they're paying bills with their checks. So it was kind of sad to see Iowa Pacific go, because they shared there was a lot of great potential, and it was really a beautiful train. So Progressive Rail took over operations of the line for a while. And so I just threw this in just a quick photo. The city of Watsonville. Since then, the Roaring Camp and Big Trees Railroad, the railroad that owns both the narrow gauge steam that runs through the Redwoods and then the boardwalk trains, has taken over the line. And this is the paint scheme this was the paint scheme of the Progressive Rail engine. It was pretty much waiting to be handed off and hauled off via UP. And Roaring Camp has since taken over, and they have a pair of CF7s, or a pair of CF7s that operate in the Watsonville area now. So just a few more shots. This is an operation called the Rock Job, and so this they used to have this beautiful set of rebuild SD59s, or what they called SD59s, and they would run from the Watsonville yard to a rock quarry in an area called Logan on the railroad. And this is the power going through Aromas, really beautiful light, beautiful evening light. And they would swing through the curve and then come into the quarry area. And this area is really cool because it's kind of got that time machine vibe to it too. I knew there was an old SP signal bridge in this quarry area, and it's all kind of private property, but you have to hike along the main line to get in there. And so now I'm going to take us fast forward, because this it was September, I finally got brave enough to hike in, and it's about a mile-long hike along the trees, praying you don't get caught by someone. And I was able to catch the Coast Starlight going through. And then this is the Salinas Hauler, which is a local that goes up to the Bay Area. And you could see it going under this classic old SP signal bridge. And you can see some of the original rock quarry structures are still there on the hillside. And it's just amazing. And the deeper I went, I found another searchlight signal, some old telephone pole lines. And it's really, other than the cars over to the left, it's kind of hard to tell that it isn't, 1940 all over again. And then this is the Rock Job now with smaller engines, and it's picked up a load of ballast to take up to the Bay Area. And that is it. And so thank you all for hanging in there with me. This is a sunset view of the Coast Starlight at Castroville. And I really appreciate your time and patience. I work for the Center for Railroad Photography and Art. And so if you ever need to catch up with me, there's my email address. And I will stop sharing. And if there are any questions, we can take them now.
Thank you, Elrond. A round of applause for Elrond Lawrence, everybody.
Very nice, very nice.
Elrond, very nice, very nice, very good stuff.
Oh, thanks.
It was worth the wait to get it going.
Good. I'm glad. Pressure was on. No, I'm really glad. Thanks.
Excellent stuff, El.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks. Oh, Robert. Yeah, thanks. I'm definitely one of the things I realized putting some of this together is I would love to do a coastline book now. I think there was about 50, 60 photos that didn't make the cut. So it was yeah, thanks so much.
Excellent. And once again, I want to thank the members of the Wisconsin chapter of the National Railway Historical Society. It's the members of our chapter that make programming like this possible. If you are not a member, it's very simple to become one. Just go to our website, www.nrhswis.org, and click the join or renew button. Or if you need to renew for 2023, we'll do that there as well. So thanks again to all of our members for being here tonight, and thank you for our guests for checking in.